everyone, and welcome to our next session with Fury Gold Mines. I'm Joe Fars, Director of Investment Banking here at Red Cloud, and I'm joined by Tim Clark, CEO of the company. He's going to be walking us through his very attractive gold projects, assets throughout Quebec, and none of it. They've most recently completed their consolidation with Dolly Varden on their Homestake Ridge Silver project, which rounds out their fourth transaction in the last 16 months, which is obviously very encouraging to see. And they've had some great systematic success at Committee Bay, Eclair, and Eleanor South. And I'll highlight that this is sponsored by our friends at Pear Tree. Thanks, guys. And I will turn it over to Tim to take it away.
Thanks, Joe, and thank you, Red Cloud and Pear Tree. We are thrilled to be here. As some of you may or may not know, I spent the better part of my career in the capital markets, the last decade over at Bank of Montreal. I stepped on the board almost a year ago, and then stepped in the CEO role back in September. It's been great to be here in this capacity, and essentially it's been a great program to jump into because I see a lot of opportunity here. I've sat through my share of spending time with companies over the last couple decades, and I was really excited to be part of this. What I would say here, just to introduce it, is it's a junior high-grade gold exploration. It's based in Canada. As many investors are going to realize pretty quickly, jurisdiction is becoming a bigger part of the landscape in terms of our industry. Companies want to de-risk the geopolitical risk, and there's no better place to be in Canada, and Quebec in particular. It's one of the best jurisdictions in the world. And we've further have a robust pipeline coming through with multiple projects, and basically have an asset sale that I think is transformational that just occurred and we closed last Friday. Let me move forward with this. First off, the disclaimer. Just to follow up here on the management team, the other part of the interest for me is when you get a bunch of opportunities to work with guys like Michael Hendrickson, who spent a career at Newmont, Brian Atkinson, 25 different countries he's worked in, and then back into a strong board with chaired by Ivan Bebic, who's had a lot of success in this industry for the last couple of decades. He most recently sold Caden to Agnico. It's just a recipe for success. Just to jump in terms of giving an overview of our platform, we have got, as Joe mentioned, Committee Bay up in Nunavut with 1.3 million ounces. We've got Eclair over in Quebec, and just north of there, the Eleanor South JV, which is situated right next to Newmont, the largest gold mining company in the world. We are the operator, and we work with Newmont and Asmit. Just to sort of circle back, and because I think this is really a key to the story, sort of a special situation. We owned an asset called Homestake out in British Columbia in the Golden Triangle. When I came in, we were trying to manage 4 different assets, and I think the key to the strategy going forward was to simplify the story. When you're a smaller company, you don't want to spread yourself too thin, both financially or your time with your geologists. And as much as we liked the project, we felt that we could monetize this and put that money back into other parts of Canada much more efficiently. We are keeping 2 board seats, so we'll have 2 and Hecla have 1 out of the 6. And as you may notice on the slide here, Hecla did step in and kept their 10% equity position. It's $5.3 million they put up to justify. I think what's going to likely happen is sort of a consolidation here. The best part about it is I think Sean Kun does a great job over at Dolly. I think there's a tremendous amount of upside there. Our $45 million position is actually now $60 million. And this could be basically a game changer for changing the company going forward in terms of the financial flexibility. We've got some optionality across the board now that I think is you just don't see at a junior company. And so keep that in mind, because as we talk more about where these companies are in this stage of the game, financing is becoming more and more crucial to them. And we may have to do one more financing, and then that's the last one we may ever have to do, which is a pretty powerful statement. As far as ESG is concerned, I think there's some companies that take it more seriously than others. I look at it as social responsibility, plus it does, and it has been proven to help the sort of the company and the culture. Not to mention, if you do a lot of the little things right, I think there's a lot more confidence that we do other things right. We have a woman on the board who is a adjunct law professor, as well as a member of the First Nations Council. We met last week. In fact, we're going to increase our allocation for funds to the ESG programs, both locally and as far as coverage of the company. I think it's an important thing just to keep in mind going forward that we are ahead of the game. As for the deposits itself, this slide for me is really important. Quebec, obviously, an extremely prolific area. We have our Eclair project that's literally situated 57 kilometers south of Newmont. You can see the JV right next to Newmont Cellular Mine, just south of that. But the takeaway here is really about the St. James Bay Dam. It's created a lot of infrastructure here, both in power and roads. I can tell you from my meetings this fall with Barrick and Newmont, Agnico, and others, that this is what they want to get into. It's relatively inexpensive when you have the infrastructure built right now. 10 or 15 years ago, our guys were, or the people who ran the East Main company before, were flying in helicopters. Now we just pull up in a truck. Again, a great overview just to keep in mind where the location, because location is important. As far as the Eclair itself, this is a 30-kilometer land package along the Canard Deformation Zone, or 55,000 hectares. There's 13 high priority targets advancing to drill stage here. We had one of the chief geologists or physicists, geophysicists in the world come take a look at this, Kim Cook, and she picked these targets out. The only drilling that's been done historically here has been Eclair and Percival. 90% of the drilling was over in Eclair, 10% at Percival. But you can see that this is wide open. There's a lot of room to grow here. And my sort of reasoning for wanting to sell Homestake was basically, we've got a lot of drilling in the eastern part of Canada for years to come. As we go into the actual deposit itself, I think this is a great representation of how wide open it is. There's 1.3 million ounces over on the western side, which is the left of the screen. There was some historic drilling over in Snake Lake in the east, but we've been stepping out over the last year or so since we acquired the company and started drilling. We found, I think, historically, basically, the tough part was defining grade and width together. We're starting to find that. There was a learning curve here, and our sort of focus right now is over in the west on the hinge, and as well as the extension. That, just to give you an idea, that the red block in the middle is 200,000 ounces, and we're targeting right up and to the right of that. I don't think it's a leap to assume that we're going to get to closer to 2 million ounces pretty soon. The last PEA done was in 2018, coupled with last year's drilling and another year of drilling this summer. I think we're going to get to be a lot more interesting to the big guys. I know that they're looking for bigger deposits up in this part of the world, and they're watching. Over in Snake Lake, just to give you an idea, we did step down a kilometer, found 94 grams at half a meter. It's wide open in there. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity for discovery. And I think, as we focus on this, the news should be out, and we're excited for what we're going to do this summer. Over in Percival, this is kind of an interesting one for us. And one of the reasons why we bought it and this package is because there's a lot of exploration out further on the land. The way they found Percival was just walking along and picking up some rocks. They found 7-gram rock, put a drill behind it. Next thing they know, they had 100,000 ounces, pretty close to surface. It was back at a point where they were looking for open pit, and they drilled out laterally, both the east and the west, came up with nothing and stopped. When we came back and took a look at this, there really wasn't any use of data. We collected what they had already. We went back through and looked at the magnetics, And sure enough, instead of going laterally, this resource plunged down in an extension, and lo and behold, 500 meters to the east, another untested parallel fold hinge was developing. I think that, again, this is something we think we can get to 500,000 to 1 million ounces pretty quickly. This is just one example of 13 other targets around Percival that we're going to take a look at. We're planning to start drilling in April, along with Eclair. And I think what you're getting here is an existing resource that's going to be closing in on 2 million ounces. And then you also have a significant amount of upside in this here in Percival and other parts of the property. Going up to the Eleanor South JV, I get a lot of questions about this because it's a little confusing. And also we're sitting next to Newmont. It's a joint venture that we have where we are the operator. We own 38.12%, Newmont 38.11%, and then Azimuth at 23%. I don't think it's a reach to assume that this is going to get consolidated. The interesting part about the geology here is that we went back through the data, looked at some infill studies, and came up with a 5.5 kilometer target right smack in the middle. A lot of the historical drilling had been over at Sirius's mine called Chichu. They have 1.96 million ounces at 0.65 grams. With a third of their asset is on our joint venture property, so that hasn't been advanced. But I think it's safe to assume that if you're looking at this, Newmont has some ounces up north. They got the Chichu deposit. We got the target that we want to do some more studies on, and then get a drill in the second half of the year. That this could be adding some value to our stock. Right now, we don't get any credit for it. Analysts don't have this in their model, whether it's worth 20 million or 200 million at some point. Again, there's a lot of ounces, and we think there's a lot of ounces up here, and that 5.5 kilometer target is one of our favorite targets by the geologists. Going up to Committee Bay. Committee Bay is the land of big gorillas. You want 5 million ounces at 8+ grams. We went up last summer and did some drilling. Our last drill hole that we came out of this after $60 million in drilling and historically was 14 grams over 10 meters, 19 grams over 3 meters, 23 grams over 1 meter. It was 3 zones of stacked mineralization and 30-meter pocket here. And essentially, we'd like to go back. I think that it's not far to assume that there's probably 2.5 million ounces up here. Right now, it's 1.3, but it's very shallow drilling. And what we hit was a shear zone, and these shear zones go on for miles. The reality, though, is when we thought about where we wanted to allocate, I kind of, again, go back to how we're simplifying the story and trying to go after and target specific areas where we think we can get the best bang for the buck. Love to go up to Nunavut. It's expensive. We decided instead of putting $44 or $5 million up there this summer, that we'd rather put it back in Quebec. We're going to hold off for the year, and we prefer to come back with a much bigger drilling program and really go after what we sort of found up here this year. From a share structure point of view, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. We got $5 million in the treasury as of last Friday, plus what we got $2 million at the end of the year coming out of Quebec revenue. But the share price here has moved down since May. Bottom out back in September. We've really traded pretty flat despite doing a lot of hurdles. So when I came on here, we raised $5.5 million in October. We had some drill results coming right back at us in the middle of tax loss season. So it didn't really help our stock, even though there were some of the best drill holes we've had ever. And then we closed the deal with Dolly, and the stock price hasn't moved. I think some are frustrated, but I know from my experience, when you create value, the stock is eventually going to get recognized. The risk and the reward profile for this company is significantly better than September. The culturally is working better. We've taken our 30% out of our costs. We're looking at taking more costs out this spring. We've got the best targets we've had ever at this. We had a huge learning curve in trying to remake and figure out the geology and the geometry of these assets. We're very excited what's in front of us. The feedback that I get from investors is solid. Again, as you go through and sort of look at we've got more news coming out with geochem studies. as well, and also potential news with the cleanup up in the joint venture. It's a stock that you want to have on your short list when you come out of these conferences. It's hard to find good ideas like this, and when you've got $60 million in marketable securities and the market cap of the company is only 110 million, it's hard to avoid. Again, we want to do a financing this spring, but we're going to be thoughtful about how we're doing it. We're not going to try to dilute our investors. I know that game pretty well, and you want to basically take what you need and save the rest when you get your share price higher. And I think this is going higher. I feel very confident in it. I bought more shares coming off the back of my experience with Bank of Montreal conference this morning. I know I've got family in the stock, and there's a lot of potential upside in the story going into the market that we find ourselves in with the world politics. Inflation is extremely high right now. I think as much as people wish it was the gold price was higher, it's in a great position. Companies are going to come back and look at the cheap valuations of these stocks. It tends to go into the larger cap first, but there is going to flow downhill. What I would also say, just since I did come back from the Bank of Montreal conference, I think there's a lot of pent up M&A. Everybody's been sitting at home for a couple of years. They haven't seen each other. I think there's a lot of consolidation ahead of us in terms of, especially in the mid cap and small cap companies. Multiple companies came up to me. They're looking for great assets. Our job is really to get our Eclair project moving forward. And this is what our goal is and what our focus is for the next couple of years.
Really solid presentation, Tim. Well laid out. We have a number of questions that came in here. I'm going to kick off with your valuation and the fact that I think there's a big disconnect here. Enterprise value at 40 to 50 million with such a healthy working capital component here. Resources at 2.6 million ounces. What do you think the market's not getting here?
Look, I think the market is just stalled out on all these junior companies. I think that they're trying to decide whether they're going to jump into something that's actually moved up. My experience have been with a lot of the investors is they'd rather buy a company that's already moved up 20, 30, 50%. And they feel a lot more comfortable taking that kind of risk. But in this market, I think you really have to think, really kind of figure out your best projects and your best run companies. Management is key, and take a jump in here, because when these stocks move, Joe, they're going to be really quick. And I think the problem is if it does move up, then you have a lot of anxiety about what to buy now. And I think we're, in a valuation, scenario with everybody else. It's just been weak, but I know for a fact from my channel checks with a lot of the guys I used to work with in capital markets, there's a big difference in enthusiasm for the gold stocks the last 2 or 3 weeks than it was the last month or so before that. Everybody's doing their work. You can see it happening. You can see the enthusiasm of people's faces when you sit across the table from them in these bigger conferences. We just have to be patient because it's coming.
I agree. Yeah, seeing that pent-up demand for sure. Maybe give your impression on why a company with good projects, is so starkly different from a company with good projects, but also a healthy cash position, particularly in this landscape.
Yeah, look, again, it's reducing risk reward. When a company has a $10 million project, people want them to have 20 million bucks in the bank. You don't want to get at the end of your $10 million in projects and either find nothing or the market isn't in the right place for you. And there's examples, and I heard this both from the sell side and buy side. As soon as a company shores up its treasury, it's lights out relative to people who don't. The key for us here again is as you look at what we have here with $60 million in marketable securities in the bank, we lock up for a year. We just have to get through one summer of funding and we're off to the races with a big bank check in the background. And so from that point of view, I think that this is going to be a very good, easy name to put in your portfolio and feel really comfortable about.